Hello and welcome to the Gooner Talk, back again with you guys for another show, for another episode of our Let's Talk Arsenal series, and specifically our show in which we're doing a Q&A, because you can never have enough of Q&As, can you, basically? And we didn't get to do our usual one on a Friday. Typically, we do these shows on a Friday at 5 p.m. We weren't able to do that because I was at a wedding yesterday, not my own. I've stressed that several times, and yet some people seem to believe that it still was my own, but it wasn't. It was certainly not. My money's next year, for those that were asking. But yeah, I managed to get up fairly fresh this morning, managed to do the 8 a.m. transfer show despite a couple of technical difficulties. And now we've driven back and we're back home, and that's why you can see me in front of the green screen properly as well. So it was pretty good, pretty chill. The other half suffered a lot more than I did. It's amazing how, like, when you spread out your day, you don't feel the effects as anywhere near as hard the next morning. And that's why I was very happy to do. I was still kind of going throughout the day knowing that I had an 8 a.m. show, and that certainly was in my mind as we approach that. But thank you everyone that joined in this morning, and apologies for the technical difficulties with that show this morning. None of that was my fault. All of it was StreamYard's, so I can only apologise. Anyway, before we kick on with today's Q&A and the phone in as well, I'm really excited because we're going to bring the phone in back, and we've got a few people coming on the show. If you are interested, of course, in having a point of view put across, or you've got something you feel like you want to say, then you can just send us a DM over at the Gooner Talk TV, and we'll try our best to get you on the show and get your thoughts and feelings heard. But today's show is sponsored by a brand new sponsor today, and the Arsenal Pick, and rather Pick Your Team by the ArsenalReview.com. Really interesting game, this. This is one of those, if you're not really into your fantasy football, this is going to be quite a fun one for you this season. And we do like our Arsenal-related sponsors here at TGT, and this is no different. In the Pick Your Team game by the Arsenal Review, effectively what you need to do is you need to put yourself in the mind of Mikel Arteta, which is not the easiest thing in the world. And what you get to do is at every single Premier League game and cup competition, it is your job to try and predict what Mikel Arteta is going to do. So you get your team and you go through it. So if you want to pick Leno for your goalkeeper, which I think is probably against Brentford, which is the first game, as you can see, coming up, it's most likely going to be Leno in goal. I'll go through some other positions. We start off with left back. We can probably think that's going to be Tierney on the right-hand side. I think it's going to be Chambers. I'm not going to reveal any more of my team because the winner of this season gets £1,000, and there are other prizes as well in this draw as well. If you do fancy having a go at this predictor throughout the whole season, maybe we can get a members league going as well. But there's going to be a global leaderboard, and the winner of that league will indeed win themselves £1,000. It's free to play. There's no catch with that as far as I'm aware. It's a free to play game. All you need to do is make yourself an account, go on there and play it every single week. Predict what team Mikel Arteta is going to play. And you could win yourself a lot of money at the end of the season. But yeah, I'm going to be as competitive as I possibly can be for this throughout the season. So make sure you get involved as well, and you can make me look like a right mug by predicting these better than I can. Link is in the description to go and have a play ahead of Brentford's game. And as I said, for those that really aren't into fantasy football or still do like fantasy football, but it is a lot of effort to be thinking about injuries, thinking about the whole league and every single team. This is very much for you Arsenal-focused people. So make sure you give it a check out. Link is in the description, and I'm sure I'll be able to give you some more feelings and thoughts about this in the shows to come throughout the week leading up to the first game. And of course, it's going to be really great to kind of marry this in with our preview show with the members and getting their predicted lineups into the Arsenal Pick Your Team from the Arsenal Review every single season. So make sure you give it a check out and sign up, and it's free to play. So, have a go at it. Anyway, this is our Q&A show, and so we are going to get through as many thoughts and feelings and comments from you guys as feasibly possible. So if you do have a big question, then please do throw them into the chat box, and we're going to get through some. I'm also going to throw my link out to some people that have been wanting to come on the show and have their thoughts heard on the channel as well. They're going to be coming in with some topics of discussion, and we're going to try and get through as many of them as we can. But we are going to kick off with your questions, and we do start with Wilson, who says, who do we prefer, Maddison or Bernardo Silva? Now, you may have seen some links to Manchester City's Bernardo Silva, as the citizens are kind of, top heavy in regards to how many attacking quality players they have. Phil Foden is there, and of course they've brought in Jack Grealish for a lot of money. You've got Raheem Sterling, Riyad Mahrez. You've got these guys. There's so many of them in those positions. Kevin De Bruyne, of course, famously as well. And it does look like Bernardo Silva could be surplus and supposedly, possibly even wanting to leave. And Arsenal have, as you would expect, wanting an attacking and creative midfielder, been linked to Bernardo Silva. Do I want him? I mean, if you're offering me Bernardo Silva, he's a brilliant player. And I certainly would be very interested in signing him. Is he better than Maddison? I'm not sure. And I like the fact that Madison is homegrown. I don't know how much of a difference there would be between their prices as well. Bernardo Silva is also slightly older, so there's that to factor in. But that does mean that he can probably hit the ground running a bit better than Madison. And he's doing it at the top of his game for a massive club in the league as well. With Madison, though, you've got kind of catch-22. You either give them 60-odd million quid. Do you think that benefits them? Or you're taking away one of their better players as we try and compete for a top 4 place with them. So it's an interesting position. I think at the moment I'm leading towards a Madison. But if you said I was getting Bernardo Silva at Arsenal this season, I certainly would not be annoyed or frustrated with that whatsoever. Hello, Yasir. Good to have in the chat, mate. Let's go for Saeed, who says, do you think Ramsdale is a smokescreen for Onana? No, I don't. I don't think he's a smokescreen at all. I very much feel like Arsenal are interested in Ramsdale. We know that they've bid for Ramsdale. We're expecting another bid to go in for him as well. I think Arsenal have kind of got very much the idea of a homegrown second-choice keeper as their main focus this summer in that area of the pitch. And I don't think it's a smokescreen. I think Ramsdale's definitely at the top of their list, and he's a player that the club seemingly want to bring in. So there is that to obviously consider as well. Let's go to PAPP, who says, Tom, if you put Ramsdale in the best defence last season, how do you think he would have done? I have absolutely no idea because there's no way of knowing. I can simply say to you, yeah, maybe he probably would have done a lot better. But at the end of the day, he's known for his shot stopping. He's better at distributing, we believe anyway, than Leno. And we have done a tactical breakdown on him, which it didn't come out amazingly well, especially not £26 million well. But maybe he would do better with a better defensive front. You would expect him to do better with a better defence in front of him. And he had to kind of shoulder a lot of the weight of Sheffield United and Bournemouth and all the teams that he's pretty much played for and won the player of the season for the teams he's played for the last 3 years. So he is a highly rated guy. He's clearly a very decent keeper. I'm just not sure I just don't think it makes much sense for Arsenal to spend £26 million on a backup keeper. So there you go. Vishal says, hi, Tom. Chelsea have wrapped up Lukaku, and that means that Lautaro Martinez is off the table. I don't think it does necessarily, but I'd be surprised if they did let him leave after getting the money in for Lukaku. What are your thoughts on this, and what alternatives do you think we should look at? Now, I don't necessarily think that we would really always intending on going for a striker this summer. I think the fact that Lautaro Martinez was available at that moment in time when we were inquiring about Bellerin's situation with Inter led the club to kind of think about that as a possibility because it was available to us. I don't necessarily think it means that we were going for him, so we're opening up for another striker. Tammy Abraham has, of course, been mentioned. But just because we don't get Martinez doesn't mean that we will definitely be going in for another striker. I'm not sure that's the case. In terms of alternatives in the striking position, there isn't, there's for that kind of caliber of player, there's not loads that are out there and readily available. You look at someone like Dusan Vlahovic at Fiorentina as another really hot young kind of prospect that's coming through. And he's definitely hot on the market and definitely someone that's inviting a lot of interest from plenty of teams. I just don't think there's loads of options for Arsenal this summer in regards to striker profiles, and it's maybe worth waiting a year with Lacazette at the club, with added creativity from a number 10 that we bring in, and then push forward with that. I don't think striker is a big priority, but if it was an option to sign player of Lautaro Martinez's quality, then that does certainly change things. So I am going to send in to Vinny our first link. So hopefully he's going to see that and he's going to be in very, very soon. But let's get a couple of questions whilst he is sorting himself out. Darren says, would you prefer Madison or Erdogan? I think Madison, if you're offering me the straight two, I would pick. In regards to a 35 million Erdogan or a 70 million Madison, I would choose Erdogan based on the price and then being able to kind of go in for a different player, if that makes sense. But I don't think that it's worth the extra £35 million to necessarily go in for someone else. Anyway, let's bring in our first guest of the day, and I'm very happy to be joined by Vinny. How you doing, mate? Are you good? Are you well?
Very well, thank you. Glad it's the weekend and relaxing. Can you hear me all right?
I can, mate. I don't know why I did it on a complete wrong screen. It's like this. It's going over our forehead. I don't know why I've done that.
Everyone would just see a big white ball on the screen. You do that to me.
You good though? All things are well.
Yeah, I'm good. I'm good. The main talking point I wanted to sort of bring up was I think a lot of people are panicking at the moment where we are obviously playing our first game next Friday. And we've still got 3 weeks left of the window. And I think we need to judge Edu and we need to judge the club when it gets to the end of the transfer window rather than now. I think if you look at our team, our first team's a decent team. When we go out against Brentford next week, we're going to have Pepe maybe on one wing, Emile Smith-Rowe, Saka, Ober up top. The weakest point with Partey being out is probably Xhaka and hopefully Lokonga and not Elneny. But then our defence is the same as last year and our keeper's the same as last year. I think the issue you've got is when players get injured, that's our issue because our depth is just appalling. Like we haven't got a backup goalkeeper. The worry that Elneny might start the first game because Partey's out injured just shows that we need to go out and bring in some depth. And the same probably at attacking midfield as well.
Do you not think there's an argument to say that we had this idea that Arteta and Edu had this plan, this fabled plan before the whole transfer window opened. And we're now less than a week away to the first game. And we've got 3 huge games. Brentford are no mugs. They did really well in the Championship last season, and they are going to be a test for us on Friday. You've then got Chelsea and Man City. You say that we need to wait to the end of the window to judge, but it's not great, I don't think, to be this kind of only one kind of main signing brought in. Lokonga's great, and I think he's got a great future ahead of him. Tavares is certainly a left back that's a backup to Tierney. And I don't think Lokonga's going to come in and start, although I think he should if we don't sign a central midfielder. I would start him over Elneny. But do you not think that they've maybe underestimated how difficult it was going to be to move players on, which was obviously needed to then bring players in this window?
I think it's circumstance that the whole market's slow at the moment and deals are slowly starting to pick up now. The teams in France don't have money. The teams in Spain and Italy don't have money. And we've got players that we want to get rid of who are on a lot higher wages than a lot of the clubs in Europe are willing to pay. So it's difficult to move the players on. But I think as we get closer to the end of the window, teams are going to drop their valuations, players are going to move on, and the dominoes are going to start to fall. If we go and pay now, the teams that are paying now are overpaying. Like teams like Man City, Chelsea, they can afford to go and splash loads of cash. Our money is a lot tighter than theirs, so we have to be a lot more shrewd in the market.
I agree with you. It is about being shrewd. It is about kind of getting in the players that are going to improve upon the certain positions. And what's annoying, though, is that shrewdness that we've talked about. I think there has been opportunities to be shrewd that we've not necessarily taken. I think a Guimaraes at £30 million is a very decent deal that maybe we should have gone for sooner. Some people would argue a Houssem Aouar. I mean, you know my feelings on him, but it's not the same as everyone else's. Him at a very kind of lower figure is for a lot of people thinking we should have done that. The right back situation, obviously, I have more sympathy because we have effectively 5 options in there. We have Bellerin and Cedric and Chambers and Maitland-Niles and Ben White who could play there. So I'm less concerned about us not going for a right back until we've moved one out. But I do feel like there has been opportunities, especially in that central midfield, which, as you said, looks so weak going into those first couple of games, especially now Partey's injured, that we probably could have done something earlier in that area.
Well, centre midfield's interesting because it's basically the same centre midfield as last year. Partey out injured, which is the same as last year. Xhaka, and then you've got Elneny, who was in the squad as one of our backups last year, and then you've got Lokonga instead of Ceballos, and Ceballos was dreadful last year, so he's probably an upgrade on him already. I think with Bruno, people forget that he's still playing in the Olympics. So well, I think they won. I think they won gold today. So maybe something's happened there, and it's going to be done in the background.
Yeah, no, that's a fair point. I actually hold my hands up. That's you completely. I mean, yeah, it
But
makes sense that we wouldn't go for Seb, but I mean, he's not obviously the only one. There are Guillermo Rodriguez was playing at the Copa America, but maybe would be someone you could bring in now, and we're seeing players kind of return from that. You've also got the Lucas Torreira situation, which isn't being sorted. We heard from Ainsley Maitland-Niles that he a couple of weeks ago was completely unaware of what the club were going to do with him from the interview. That whether you like the interview or not, and I'm not a big fan
yeah,
of it, but it happened. And he did tell us that he didn't really was none the wiser. You've also got this Joe Willock situation, which we keep being told by Newcastle is they're waiting on Arsenal to make a decision. It just does seem like there's a lot of hesitation and a lot of indecision. Do you not feel behind the scenes right now?
well, interesting you said Awar a minute ago. If we signed Awar and we sold Willock, I would find Edu and slap him because I would be that I would be that fuming. Especially as a club, we're like concentrating on building a homegrown team. He's
Yeah,
people rave about Emil Smith Rowe, and I think Emil Smith Rowe potentially has a better upside than Willock, but
sure.
he's a year younger. He played 20 odd games last season and scored 2 goals, whereas Willock was consistently scoring last year. It
Yeah,
takes time for a player to develop, and I think we need to give Willock a chance. I know a lot of fans don't say maybe he's not technical enough, but
yeah,
we get the ball to the byline all the time, and then when we put the ball in the box, there's never anyone there, and creating space for yourself in the box is something that's almost impossible to teach. Players like Michael Owen for years were just incredible at popping up at the right time, in the right place, and
yeah,
finishing it. And Willock went on loan, scored 8 in 8, and then people are still saying, let's get rid of him for 20 million when he's homegrown. And like,
yeah,
one game back, I know it's a pre-season friendly, and I know the game is a lot more open, but we get the ball to the byline. Who's on the edge of the box ready to hit it in? And it's a perfect finish as well.
it was a
So
girl. Yeah,
for me, for 20 million, if we sell him, I think that's criminal. I do sort of understand that if we need to use that money to bring in someone like Madison or Odegaard, and we manage to get him back, but for me, I just wouldn't want to sell him. I think he needs to be given a chance.
yeah. I do agree in the sense. I think that the only thing that changes my mind on the Joe Willock thing is the lack of sales elsewhere, and that may be forcing our hand, especially if say we sell Willock and that means we can get a Madison. If we sold Willock and did nothing, I would be fuming about that.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So it certainly is to do with that. Anyway, thank you. Go on, Vinny. Very quickly before we
I,
go. Go
I,
on.
I was just going to say the Torreira one's a really interesting conversation because, like, I really like him as a player, but then I also understand that, like, he's been unsettled at the club. But one thing that was quite interesting when he was talking about his career not too long ago, he was saying that he needed to see a psychiatrist and stuff like that about not
Yeah.
playing. Maybe he's a sort of player that you start giving him some game time, he finally finds his feet and becomes happy again. But for me, we should sell him, right?
Mm.
But if we can't get any money for him, he improves our centre and midfield against last season. Because if you go into this year and you have Partey, Xhaka, Torreira, and Lokonga, that's
Mm.
better than what we had last season. And I think he'd do a great job alongside Partey if we can make him happy.
Yeah, it's such a volatile and unstable situation, isn't it? So we can't
Yeah.
ever put any kind of hedge our bets on it, really, because it's so difficult. And he's not even returned yet from training, so we don't even know.
And he had that horrific family issue with his
Of
mum as
course,
well, which,
yeah,
like, you can't explain how difficult that's going to be for someone's life. And the first
yeah,
thing you do is blame your job when something bad happens in your job in your life. So,
yeah,
fingers crossed he can sort his head out and he's happy either at us or somewhere else in the future.
definitely. Thank you, Vinny, for your time this afternoon. I hope you've enjoyed your brief spell, and I'm sure we'll see you again very soon.
Cool. See you later, mate. Take
See you
care.
later, mate. Have
Bye,
a
everyone.
fantastic day. See you later, mate.
Thanks.
Awesome. So a massive thank you to Vinny for helping us out there and raising that point. Are people reacting too quickly at the moment? Are people overreacting to the point where we've got a week left? We've made a couple of signings. There is a lot of the window still to go, and there are a lot of teams that are still yet to do big business. Obviously, we are now seeing Chelsea move quite heavily for Lukaku. We're seeing Man City go get Grealish, and we're seeing Manchester United getting their big players. But whilst they are certainly teams that Arsenal need to target to get into the top four, it is certainly some of the other teams around us that we need to be more aware of. And we have spent £75 million in this window already. That kind of does go under the table, but there are a number of positions that Arsenal certainly need to kind of get their finger out for, that's for sure. Aditya says, hey, Tom, however our transfer market business turns out to be, what and how, according to you, the Amazon series will affect our season, considering much of the squad is quite young? I don't necessarily think the Amazon series is going to have a huge effect on the season. I really don't. I mean, Manchester City had it. They won the league. Spurs had it. They didn't win anything, but, that's pretty regular for both teams. And I think with both of those teams having that, I don't necessarily think it was a big distraction. If anything, it was a financial gain for those because we know how much money is involved with that kind of situation as well. The whole series and the psychological side of things, if anything, I feel like these players do thrive off the attention, thrive off that kind of situation. So if anything, you never know, it could even be better. But we'll have to wait and see that's for sure. Let's scroll down a little bit more to Sarvik, who says, will Ramsdale, the mainstay for Arsenal in the next decade, Tom? He's 23 and he's only going to get better. I mean, could he be a mainstay for us for the next 10 years? He is only 23, and that is a very young for a goalkeeper, and he's impressed in the places that he's been. And I think people associate the clubs that he's at with necessarily him being a negative or not necessarily a fantastic player. But for me, I struggle with that. I struggle with the idea of saying that he shouldn't be brought in just as a player. To forget the money for a second, like just casting him aside as a possible option at goalkeeper just because of the teams he plays for, I think is ludicrous. The same way I think it's ludicrous to write off a Tammy Abraham just because he plays for Chelsea. It's when the figures and the finances come into this with Tammy Abraham, 40 million quid, no thank you. Ramsdale, 26 million, no thank you. Like, I'm not interested in that type of amount of money, but to throw away a player, no matter who they are, just because of the club they play for, I find a little bit strange and a little bit obsessive around kind of the past, and maybe because of the situation those clubs are currently in. Matt says, do you feel like we should consider lowering our price tags for players that we can't shift? I know that we moan about selling cheap. I'm just worried that we are going to keep paying players off. Look, the thing is, Matt, is that we find ourselves in a situation where we've got a lot of players that are just simply not worth a lot of money, and that they're not very attractive for teams to want to really come in for, and especially teams that are going to want to pay the money associated with those kinds of players. You look at the Kolasinac situation, for instance. You've got a player there that is on £100,000+ per week, has not put in a £10,000 per week performance in a very long time. And that's a situation that's very difficult when he's got a year left on his deal and that would cost Arsenal around £5 million to pay off. Yes, there's interest from Fenerbahce, but hopefully what can happen is that we can terminate that deal mutually. We won't have to pay anything. And then Fenerbahce can just sign him on a free. And yes, it's annoying that we've seen that happen again after it happened with Mustafi and Socrates. And it looks like it's going to happen to a similar with maybe Guendouzi. But unfortunately, that's not the current regime's problem, in the sense that they didn't cause that problem entirely. Yes, there's some guilty parties in regards to the Willian transfer, but I don't think anyone really thought he was going to be as bad as he has been. And it looks like a massive mistake. But the players that we have seen come in, like a Mustafi, 34 million on a player that, was very questionable at the time. Socrates, 60 million on a centre-back when we could have really brought someone in that was better than him. You look at the player like Guendouzi, and that's how it's been handled. That's not because of recruitment. That's just the situation, and unfortunately a player of an attitude. Although you could have technically argue, I suppose, that maybe you should have looked into how he was behind the scenes on a social level, and there were warning signs before he came to Arsenal. So maybe that is certainly something you can put at the floor of the people have recruited him, which was in parts Sven Mislintat and of course Raul Sanyehi's involvement, not necessarily Edu. So that is certainly something to think about. We're going to try and get our next guest on very soon, but we're going to answer some more of your questions as we approach. So there you go. The Arsenal Misfits. Arsenal Misfits, by the way, I offered you the opportunity to come on the show. I saw that you put a comment in one of our videos the other day. I didn't get a reply. Strange. But the offer is still there to make sure you come on one of these shows. Let's see what you're saying in regards to your comment. The Ramsdale situation drives me crazy, only because of what put us in this situation was a totally clueless selling of Martinez, who was our best keeper, and a ridiculous amount that we got him for. Now, I think that the Martinez situation is certainly one that you can look at with the benefit of hindsight. At the time, he played, 12 games in the Premier League in kind of that closed period. Yes, he played more throughout the entire season and his career. But I don't think at the time accepting a £17 million deal for a player that was effectively our backup keeper when he barely played any games was that far-fetched, especially when you had Bernd already at the club. Yes, with the benefit of hindsight, it looks crazy, and I regret it, and I'd love to have seen us keep Martinez now with that benefit of hindsight. I just don't think you can call it a clueless and ridiculous decision at the time. But Misfit, maybe it's one that you can come on the show and debate me with. Let's see. Let's bring our next guest in, making back-to-back performances on TGT after his appearance the other day on the Arsenal Transfer Podcast. It's Chris. How you doing, mate? Are you well? Are you good?
Hey, how are you? I'm good. I'm doing good. And I must say, I was really impressed and a little bit jealous this morning when I saw you being in such a good shape after a wedding. I've never been in such a good shape after a wedding. I don't know how you did it, but good job, mate.
It's pacing yourself, it's stretching them out, it's taking regular glasses of water, all of these things that, are sensible, but a lot of people just don't follow those kind of rules. And I completely understand why, for the benefit of fun, basically. You also have to think about it. It's one of those weddings where, I don't know if you've been in this situation where you go to and the only people that you know is literally the bride and groom, and no one else there. So I was in that situation, which you would think maybe would encourage you to try and put yourself in a state that you'd be more open to conversation. But I think it was more so just, I'm thinking I've got an 8 a.m. show tomorrow morning and I've got to make sure I'm fit for that. So, prep is everything.
Well,
anyway, Chris, tell us.
Into the situation. Yeah, so
tell us your topic.
Yeah, my main talking point that I wanted to bring here today, I want to talk about the transfer window in general. I remember last year, people like Fabrizio Romano were saying that obviously the transfer window was very slow because of pandemic, but next year is going to be massive. And obviously we see it's not. And now people are saying that it's probably going to be like that for a while now. They don't anticipate that it's going to change next year or even in 2 years. But at the same time, you have big boys like City, like Chelsea, like Paris Saint-Germain, obviously, spending massive amounts of money. So on one hand, you have clubs that spend almost nothing. And on the other hand, you have clubs that spend record-breaking sums. So my question to you is, do you think that in the following years, a gap between clubs with rich owners who like to spend and the other clubs will grow even bigger than it is now?
In short, Chris, absolutely. It's really difficult to come up with a different answer. The only way that gap closes is if there are restrictions put in place to then obviously kind of limit those clubs from their spending. And we thought that was what was going to happen with FFP. And FFP, as was showed, with everything that was kind of revealed by Der Spiegel, the German outlet that tried to obviously out Manchester City for a lot of things that went on behind the scenes, that crumbled. They appealed it. They got it off. They were still able to play in the Champions League, which would have been a massive hindrance to them going forwards if they weren't able to play in the Champions League. There was no guarantees that Kevin De Bruyne would have signed his new contract. There's no guarantees that there is a guarantee that Jack Grealish wouldn't have come, because we're told by Villa's management that he would only have moved for a Champions League club. So that deal wouldn't have happened. Would Harry Kane think about moving to Manchester City without Champions League football? Arguably not. So they tried to put these restrictions in place. They tried to sanction these clubs who are arguably doing and allegedly doing things they shouldn't have done, but they appealed it and they won. And it's staggering to me that we can see so much spending. I mean, Chelsea obviously had a ban for one season. Last season, they spent a ridiculous amount of money. They brought in 7 players, the likes of Werner, etc., Kai Havertz, and everyone else. And this season, they're going and spending 100 million plus or ish around that figure on Lukaku, and probably on Jules Koundé as well, coming in to add even more money to that. So it's never going to stop. And these are teams, obviously, that have got big backers behind them. Chelsea themselves, though, have done very well in the sales market to move on kind of those younger players, and so you've got to give them credit. But Manchester City certainly haven't been able to do that, sell off really well. They've bought exceptionally well, but they've done that by spending big money. So in short, Chris, and in long, it's a no. Do you personally see that changing? Do you think there is anything that can be done and enforced to stop that gap from widening?
I think it's going to get worse. I can't see how PSG is able to pass the regulation this year. I remember like a year and a half ago when Arteta came and we had January, we can only bring players on loan because our budget for paying players is already too big, so we can't pay players anymore at the time. And looking at the players that Paris Saint-Germain brought this summer, how can they possibly, pass the regulations and do it correctly? They can't, obviously. So it's a big, big joke. So I think it's going to get worse because the pandemic hit a lot of clubs, especially in Europe, like you said earlier, like Vinny said, also in Spain, in Italy. Like Roma couldn't buy Granit for 20 million euro, and he was supposedly their main target. So it might be really tough for us to sell players and for anybody else to sell players and therefore to buy players. Clubs like us that want to sell, to buy, is going to be really tough. That's why I can kind of come to terms that this transfer window is not going to be as good as I hoped it was going to be. Still hoping for one big transfer, and I think the other one will be a backup goalkeeper, though I don't expect it's going to be the one that we would want. I don't think it's going to be Onana. I don't even think it's going to be Ramsey. Maybe it's going to be Freddie Woodman if they agree some kind of deal involving Willock, but then we lose Willock. So I still think we may get Maddison, but it's going to be one big transfer, and that's all.
It is. I mean, I'm just trying to look down kind of the history of Arsenal transfers now, and we've already spent 75 million quid, which is obviously a lot of money, especially we say for Arsenal, but we consider Arsenal across the last 20 years as a club that still was a little bit kind of restricted with how they're spending. They haven't been over the last kind of half decade or so, and they've spent a lot of money. In fact, since Kroenke was involved with the club in 2007, they've spent nearly $1 billion just on players coming in. So I suppose the kind of a myth, I guess, about Arsenal not really spending on players. But what I haven't done is spent kind of big figures on multiple players. We've spent £50 million on Ben White. If we were to get James Maddison, you'd effectively think that's another 60 million. People want a central midfielder that would cost us probably around 30 million plus to bring in. And it's those kind of deals that add up that would be kind of different for Arsenal in a window. So there's a question actually in the chat box that I wanted to ask you. PJT says, how difficult is it for fans to separate Arsenal's transfer activity from other teams at the top, which is kind of around your question at the start. It's okay that fans want to be back at a greater heights, but given the climate, how problematic is this? And do you think that the context is always applied, that Arsenal are trying to do business in a market that, as you said earlier, is dominated by these teams with massively rich backers? And is it ever going to be possible without the Kroenkes investing for us to catch those teams?
Well, we've seen stories like Leicester. We've seen stories like that last year with Lille in France. So it's possible. But the question is it long term, or is it once breakthrough, and then it's going to be back to regular? Paris on top, in here Chelsea and City on top. And to answer the question, of course, it's harder for Arsenal fans to separate the general activity and our activity in the transfer market, because we want Arsenal to do well. We want Arsenal to buy the best players. So we are not really concerned about what other clubs are doing. We want us to buy. And I think that if the market was more as it used to be, we would be able to sell a few players, and then I'm sure we would bring more players in as well. So yeah, we have to take that into consideration. It's coming back to the point you already talked with Vinny, so I'm not going to repeat that. But yeah, it's a really, really tough market, and we have to brace ourselves for a tough season. I think we have to hope for the best, but it's looking tough.
It is looking tough right now. You'd say going into the new season. I'm not as concerned having the team that we've got maybe against Brentford, but I would have loved to us to have been a lot more prepared going into those games against Chelsea and City. It's not to downplay Brentford. I think we have enough to beat a Brentford side right now, but I would have loved to have been, much more improved on last season going into those games, and losing Partey is huge for those matches, which is a real shame. Anyway, Chris, thank you so much for coming on, mate. Really appreciate your time. Someone did ask, is your cat alive in the bottom left-hand corner? It is. Just confirm. Oh, yeah. He's very, very still. I just watching alive.
Well, he's angry with me because lately he likes to sleep on my chair here. Right. So
and now you're using it.
Yeah, so now we have to leave. That's why he's angry there. But yeah, he's fine. So thanks again for having me.
No problem.
And have a great rest
I'm
of the
sure we'll
weekend,
see you again very soon.
See you soon. Bye.
Have a good one, mate. See you later. massive thank you to Chris, one of our fantastic members. You can find him in our Discord server if you would like to join that, and you could get the opportunity to come on the show even more regularly on our Arsenal Transfer Podcast. And as the season starts and we start doing our preview shows, we will, of course, be bringing our members once again for lots of those shows too. So make sure you do join up as a member and find out. Alex McCarthy says, are Arsenal waiting for near or on deadline day to do any kind of big signing? I just have a feeling the club and Amazon want to do something big for the cameras. I'm not sure that's the case. I think there will certainly be movement on deadline day, just the way that this window is kind of working out at the moment. And that for me is, I think it's very obvious to kind of turn around and say, yes, the transfer market and the Amazon documentary is a perfect thing to try and blow something out of proportion. But I think Arsenal will not want to do anything specific. I actually think that Arsenal are going to want to try as much as they can to come off as well as they can in the transfer window, and especially specifically in the Amazon documentary. And because of that, I think they wouldn't enjoy a lot less drama. Obviously, the documentary wouldn't be as interesting, but the club will try to avoid that as much as possible, but still trying to make it as kind of, exclusive and incisive and as kind of open as we can to see what goes on inside the club. But I don't necessarily think that the documentary is having an impact on the transfer window. But I'm not surprised, Alex, that you've asked the question, because it is certainly not an uncommon one, or not one that's not held by a lot of people as well. So there's certainly something to that. James says, hey Tom, I truly don't believe we'll get another central midfielder. We didn't renew Ceballos, so we brought in Lokonga. If we get Madison or Bruno Guimaraes, sell Bellerin and bring in a right back, and I'll be very happy. I mean, Madison / Bruno is obviously two different positions, isn't it? So that's slightly difficult to say. I think what you're saying there about if we don't bring in another central midfielder, you'd be happy. I still think we definitely need to add one, even with Granit Xhaka staying. I just think we need to improve that quality in there. And it's not about blocking the path of a Lokonga or not thinking that Aziz is good enough to come through. It's just about adding quality where you can. That's the most important thing. I'd love a Madison to come in. I'd love a kind of an equivalent of Bernardo Silva to come in as well. But it's the Bellerin situation is just so difficult, because selling these players, and we've got so many players there. If you sell Bellerin and bring in a right back, you've still got Chambers, you've still got Cedric, you've still got Maitland-Niles, you've still got players that can play at right back. And it is very kind of convoluted, congested in that right back position. So that's kind of the situation that we find ourselves in at right back. And it is a really difficult one. PAPP says, would you sell Mahrez, Gundogan instead of Bernardo, and is Grealish better than them? If I was a Manchester City fan, would I sell those two over Bernardo Silva? I mean, Mahrez is obviously much older, so it would make more sense to move him on. Gundogan I like a lot, and I think his experience, his leadership in the midfield is key for them, so I wouldn't sell him. And is Grealish better than them? I think Grealish is certainly... I think Grealish's price tag and what he's done on the pitch and for what team he's done it for shows how good he is. He comes on for England, he's a decisive figure. He's so well liked by so much of kind of even the UK, and not the UK, but England specifically. And I think that for me is, and everything that he's done, his chance creation stats, his dribbling statistics are insane. I think he is better than those players. And I think he improves that team, which is crazy to think that they can even sign players to improve that team. And they've managed it, but it's cost them a hell of a lot of money. Rangers did finally lose 41 games unbeaten. 49 is a very difficult number to match, and we wear that badge proudly. Manu says, how do you see the striker position in the next 3 years? Are we going to sell Alba and Lacazette and let them run it out, or rather let them run it out? I think that what we will do is this year specifically is hang on to the players that we've got. I would be surprised to see us bring in a striker this window. I think it will be one that we let kind of go until the end of this season. Lacazette's contract may just expire and we let that one run through. Aubameyang will be here, I imagine, till the end of his contract, unless something weird happens with 1 year left on his deal after this current season finishes. And I think we may have more options available to us then as well, considering how we might sell players, how much money is going to be available to us, where we finish in regards to the league. We could be in the Champions League. Who knows? It's very unlikely, but we could be back in Europe next season, which will obviously be one of the main targets. And I think there may be some better options at striker for us next summer than there currently is in this summer. So there you go. Anyway, we are going to bring in a brand new guest and someone making their debut on the channel as well. It's Kellen. How you doing, mate? Are you well? Are you good?
I'm good, man. I'm doing well.
Fantastic stuff. Absolute pleasure to have you on the show, mate. Tell the listeners what topic it is you're desperate to discuss.
I really wanted to talk about the Charles Watts article about sort of Arsenal's sort of stall in the transfer market. So the main thing that came out of it sort of was this quote from within the club that said that basically Arsenal want to have patience, like they want patience from the fans. They want us to become a little bit, come back from the ledge. We're okay. Like the idea that judge us at the end of the window. We're okay. And that was like the big quote was judge us at the end of the window.
I can read it for you. It said sources at the club continue to plead for patience from fans, arguing, and in quotes, judge us at the end of the window is what Charles Watts' article says. So, yeah.
Right. And sort of the thing that I started thinking about over the last sort of week after this has come out was I don't know whether it's the idea that we might be that sort of indicates that there might be a little bit of panic, like they're feeling the pressure. Like they might be feeling a little bit on the hot seat, in which case that's not something I want to see. I don't want that to be in the club, putting out there that, we're or even under that kind of feeling, because I don't think that many clubs and many organizations make good decisions under pressure. That's just not really a place to do or a place to be. So I really was wondering if you see it more as that, or more so that they're more on the patient side, and that they think, the market's going to open up at the end, and that we might be a little too patient on that idea of, hey, it'll all work out in the end, because we have been a club that's sort of been too patient with things. I mean, you look at the Eddie Nketiah situation, sort of the Reece Nelson situation, where we've had the opportunity, the Ainsley Maitland-Niles situation. We've had the opportunity to do something, and we haven't really seen that, that sort of edge, that ruthlessness to sort of make that decision. And they're like, well, I don't know if it's necessarily indecision. I think it's more, they think that, that value will be there later, or that value will increase later. So I guess I wanted to know your thoughts, whether you see it more as
it's a really good point, to be fair. I mean, it's if you haven't, guys, I have left a link to the article in the description, so please make sure you go and check out and give Charles Watts' piece a read, because it is really good. And when Kellen, I read that quote about kind of asking us for patience and to judge us at the end of the window, it's very stereotypical of Arsenal. I mean, you hit the nail on the head when you said, like, Arsenal and patience are two words that go together, and we feel as fans that we've been patient for so long. And there's an element of sympathy that I have, because the regimes are changing. We've gone from Wenger to Emery to Arteta, and we've changed massively at the top of the executive level with kind of Gazidis leaving and Vinay coming in and Raul leaving and Edu coming in, Sven Mislintat joining and leaving. There's been lots of change. But at the end of the day is during that entire period, we've still gone backwards. And if there's one thing that the reason why we've gone backwards, Kellen, is because of recruitment, and in both directions, both buying and selling. And we haven't been urgent enough at times, or we haven't identified areas that we've needed to improve quickly enough, and we haven't acted upon it quickly enough. It took until last summer for us to sign a good centre-back and a good centre midfielder, things that we've needed for 10 years at the club, like desperately. So I do think that the club are kind of peddling a bit of a media-friendly, try and calm the crowd down a little bit with that line and with that quote, and to say judge us at the end of the window, sure, but the end of the window is a little bit too late, as Arsenal kind of already has been.
Oh yeah, and you pointed out when you were talking with Arsblog that it seems more so, and this is where I kind of got the idea of they might be feeling the pressure a little bit, and why that might have put that out, because when you talked to Arsblog, you pointed out that there's a lot that we're putting off to the end. I mean, it'd be different when we're talking about sort of a busy end to the window. I normally think of maybe 2 outgoings, maybe 1 or 2 incomings. I mean, that's maybe max 3 to 4 deals, right? Sure. We're talking about possibly we want maybe 4 or 5 outgoings, and we want like at least 2 incomings. With a goalkeeper and an attacking mid, as most people have brought up, but that's 6 to 7 deals that you're putting off to the last 2 weeks, and I feel like that's a lot to do. And I mean, not just a normal lot to do, that's a lot to do. And I wanted to get your perspective, just because it came out today was the whole thing with Edu being on vacation. does it seem?
I
know that he can. I know that you can do stuff from everywhere, but
yeah.
Does that give you any sort of angst, any sort of anxiety that this, that they may be too patient, that there may be a little bit of a sense of like, don't worry, we're fine, we're gonna do it, we'll get done at the end while the room's burning around. I don't know if you.
Yeah, I know the famous meme. Yeah. The best one is the Ralph from The Simpsons sitting on the back of the bus, sitting there going, "I'm in danger." That's how Arsenal feels right now. But I know exactly what you mean in regards to kind of the Edu thing, and then I'll come on to kind of the whole. I'll be leaving it too late. Edu originally did that holiday. I think it was, I might be wrong, I think it was like Mallorca or something, and he went away and there was a video of him on a jet ski and something like that. And at the time, that was kind of early on in the window, and I was sitting there and going, I'm not going to get angry about that. It's just, it's really nothing. And obviously we've got this amazing thing called WhatsApp, which is where a lot of transfer deals actually genuinely do get done on WhatsApp, and a lot of the talks go on behind the scenes on that app. So there is that. But even I, seeing another picture on holiday, my reaction was, "Oh, come on, man! Like, I've defended you. What are you doing?" That was very much my opinion at that time, and I was a little bit kind of, I'm not going to say anything on this right now. I'm going to bring this up because it is going to be thrown in my face, and it was a real. So thanks, Keller, for bringing it up. Fantastic. No, it is worthy of pointing out, and I do think maybe it's ill-advised to be posting. If you want to go on holiday, sure, like whatever. Keep it under wraps. Like, don't post it. Like, that is a little bit going, you're tempting fate, and you are kind of poker beast of the Arsenal fan base. But in regards to kind of how much we've got to do, yes, there's loads. And the Nketiah thing with the injury that's come out today, I think pretty much rules out maybe a departure. We know that really players can be signed that are injured. We did it with Kieran Tierney. We did it with famously Kim Kallstrom. And players can move on that are injured. But I think that will have a big damaging impact on the likelihood of Nketiah moving on this window, which is really difficult because he has a year left on his deal, and that's really tricky. In regards to kind of other players, Ainsley Maitland-Niles, my feeling is that he will stay. I think he will remain at the club this season. I just don't think they're going to get the figure that they want for him, and I don't think Leicester are going to accept him as part of that Madison deal. I could be wrong, but I don't think. Joe Willock, I think, is going to go. My growing feeling on that is that eventually the club will bend to Newcastle's will, and their realization that they're struggling to sell players will force their hand, and they will sell Joe Willock, and they'll get a £20-ish million fee for the guy, which is fine if we sign someone, but it's not fine if he goes and we do nothing and we're left wondering what we could have had, especially if he goes off and does what he did at the end of last season, which would be an absolute killer. Reece Nelson, I think, will also go. I think we'll get rid of him. Kolasinac, I think, will terminate. But yeah, we've got a lot to do. And I kind of predicted, I think, maybe 3 more signings will be made of varying levels of kind of, marquee-ness, if you want to call it that. But yeah, you hit the nail on the head with everything you said, Kellen, and there were good questions. And I think the questions that everyone is really kind of concerned about right now. And all we can do is listen to those words that you said that the club have used and judge them at the end of the window, because that's all we can do as fans. And it is frustrating, but yeah, it is what it is. Anyway, any closing thoughts from yourself on any of the topics that we discussed?
Just one thing I sort of want to leave, and I hope you talk a little bit, because I know you've been touching on it periodically throughout the show, is sort of this theme of we were going to be ruthless. And this is something that Arteta said at the beginning of the transfer window, and I think that people have been like, well, that applies to this transfer window, when, if I remember correctly, Arteta said that on day one. So I've had trouble seeing that with guys like Reece Nelson, Eddie Nketiah. I think both of them should have either went on loan or been sold in January. And I feel like we probably should have had some ruthlessness with Ainsley Maitland-Niles last year, or with Alex Lacazette a year ago. I just want to know sort of your closing ideas on that ruthlessness and where we should judge that, or what we should be thinking.
Yeah, no, I understand. I mean, we judge it based on what we do. We judge it, and ironically, I use the phrase again, we judge it at the end of the window, because there's no point me sitting here now and putting out a conclusion and saying, look, this window is a failure right now. I can't do that legitimately, because there's still time for things to change, and it would be premature to do that. There is an argument that some people would say, look, the season starts on Friday, and we've not signed all those positions that we needed to, it is a failure.
But I'm saying, is it more fair to judge them? I'm talking more so over the life of the last, year, 18 months. Is it fair to say that what are your thoughts? Do you think we have been ruthless, or do you think that sort of just was one of those things that we like to hear, but we didn't? It's a lot harder to do in practice, and they didn't realize that.
I think they've been ruthless inconsistently is probably the best way to put it. Because I can't sit here and say they haven't been ruthless with everything, because I think with Guendouzi, they've been ruthless. I mean, Arteta's been very ruthless with that. I think with Saliba, whether we like how they've done it or not, they've been ruthless with Saliba. Not enough that they forced him to go to an English club. He still managed to go where he wanted. But they haven't been ruthless in the market. But they haven't committed to buying players that maybe they could have done. And yes, sure, we can argue that because we haven't been able to move players on as much as we'd like, maybe that's hampered them a bit, or because of the pandemic being here and that affecting how we were able to sell players. But with players like Kolasinac who have a year left, Nketiah who has a year left, Reece Nelson who's got 2 years left, Guendouzi who had a year left, Lacazette who's got a year left, I feel like there could have been decisions made on those players earlier. I think there are others that are trickier, like Ainsley Maitland-Niles. That's a trickier situation. Joe Willock's trickier as well because of the interest, but there's the confliction of how good is he? Is it worth keeping him? There's situations that breed indecision and mean that ruthless word goes out the window, frankly. But the answer is, if you were to say, I'm going to evaluate all these points and come to a conclusion about whether Arsenal have been ruthless overall, whilst there have been moments of ruthlessness, I don't think there's been enough to say the club are moving in a proactive direction to really change their fortunes for the better. So that's probably where I would lie. But I know I'm still with a little bit of my arse on the fence, but it's tricky to...
That's a much better answer than I was hoping for. So.
Oh, brilliant. I don't know what that says about me, but no, that's all good, mate. Absolute brilliant debut, Kellen. You got a lot of love in the chat box, as I saw as well. So really appreciate you jumping on and throwing that forwards. And the article as well was a fantastic highlight too.
Awesome. I appreciate it, man.
No worries. I'm sure we'll see you back again very soon, I'm sure. Have a good one, Kellen. Have a good one.
You too, mate.
See you later. Have a good one. I've said have a good one like 5 times now. It's one of those moments where you get obsessed around saying like, I used to do it on the start of the channel with the words and whatnot. I have some people comment leaving, why are you saying and whatnot over and over again? But there you go. Anyway, we've got 9 or so minutes left of the hour show. And so we do have an opportunity to answer some of your questions. I did see a super chat from Richard K in the chat box. Thank you so much, Richard, for your kind donation. Richard says, Arsenal should sell Chambers, Bellerin, El Neni, Holding and Nelson and bring in Loftus-Cheek. Milivovic. Is that, what's his name? Is it Milovic or something like that? I know what you mean. It's the penalty taker. I think he's Serbian international for Crystal Palace. Unless you mean Milinkovic-Savic, there's a lot of people. So it could be from Palace. Swap Immobile for Lacazette. Wow, that's an interesting one. Bring in Walker-Peters, former Spurs player, of course, from Southampton, and McGinn from Aston Villa, and Danny Olmo as the number 10. Richard, you've described kind of a FIFA player's fantasy almost there, and I mean that in the kindest way possible. That there is a lot of players that you mentioned there, and I think that to expect that amount of turnover with time remaining is fanciful. I do take some of those players as good options. I think I appreciate, despite him being formerly of Spurs, Kyle Walker-Peters is a very capable right back and someone that's not really been suggested by too many people, and I think is certainly an underrated option that you've shouted out there. Ruben Loftus-Cheek, I'm not quite sure on him. I'm not sure if he's any better than, say, a Lokonga that we've brought in. And I'd like to find like a middle ground between a Thomas Partey and a Lokonga, and as close to Thomas Partey as we can in regards to quality. And I think a Bruno Guimaraes would give us that much more than a Ruben Loftus-Cheek. But I appreciate the shout. A Mihailovic from... or is it Milivojevic? I think that's how you say it. Milivojevic, anyway, from Crystal Palace. I don't genuinely know too much about him besides his penalty-taking skills and his leadership skills for Palace. I'm not sure if that's the level of player that we should be looking at, but I may be being a little bit ignorant of how good he's been for them. But again, I can't comment too greatly. Immobile is an interesting one. I think maybe the age profile is slightly off for a striker. But I appreciate the John McGinn shout, but he has just joined... rather he has just signed a new contract with Villa that's very much a long-term one. So I doubt that you'd be able to get him in. So there you go. But thank you, Richard, for the donation and the question. We have got 5 more minutes, so keep throwing those questions in as best we can. Another super chat from Mr. Joe Kerr. Thank you ever so much, mate. Really appreciate your support and your presence in the Discord server as always. Do you feel the problem shifting players will lead to a vital revision to our wages policy and structure going forwards? Our wage structure is a very delicate situation. You've got Aubameyang on an Ozil-style contract now. You've got Lacazette, who doesn't quite break through that £200,000 per week barrier. You've just signed up Ben White to what we believe to be £100,000 per week plus kind of wage. Granit Xhaka's getting an incremental increase on his wage. Thomas Partey's on a very good wage. You've got players like Kolasinac who aren't playing on £100,000 plus per week. You've just signed up Emile Smith-Rowe to a figure to what we believe is reported at around £80,000 per week, and he's still obviously only 21. You've got Bukayo Saka, Gabriel Martinelli having just signed new contracts, still on fairly good wages and certainly down kind of the right route as I thought we should have looked for their wages at that age and output. Nicolas Pepe's on a very good wage, having signed for a club record fee. Do I think we will revise our wage structure? Joe, I think there's so much going on in regards to just actually shifting the deadwood that thinking about the wage structure may make some heads explode with the amount of stuff that we've got going on at the club. Is it a problem? I think it is a problem whilst you've got players on £300,000 plus per week. I don't think that Arsenal are in a position as a club that they can afford to be putting players on that kind of wage when you are seeing nothing like the output of other teams like Man City, Man United and Chelsea, who do have players on similar wages, but are winning Champions Leagues, getting in the Champions League for starters, winning Premier Leagues, etc. So that's the first thing I would absolutely throw out as soon as possible, is paying players that amount of money, because if anything, all it does is it makes players aspire to try and earn that much and ask for that much. Because if you look at Aubameyang's output last season, Nicolas Pepe, who had a better season than Aubameyang, would turn around and say, look, hey, why am I not on that? I'm doing more than this guy. And you need to kind of eradicate that situation. So it's so much that needs to think about. It's a very good question. It's certainly a wages. It's something that Arsenal need to focus on and had a very good kind of a lid on it under Wenger besides the last contract for Ozil. But it is a situation that is a bit of a train on a downward slope and you can't let it run away from you. But I think there's a lot more in terms of a priority of moving that deadwood out first and not allowing us to sign players onto that £300,000 plus per week deal before we worry about a whole restructuring of that wage style thing. But I hope you appreciate the answer. Vinny, thank you so much, of course, for joining us earlier on in the show, and appreciate your questions and support as always. Do you think Messi will leave Barca, or do you think it's just posturing? He looks ever so close to a PSG deal at this stage. I have said time after time, it would not surprise me if he stays with Barca still. It does seem like a little bit of a power play that could end up backfiring for Barca and Messi if he does indeed sign for PSG. By the way, some of the slander of Liga based upon the Messi deal is utterly ridiculous. The hyperbole that's being used to describe that league is frankly ridiculous, considering the team he's signing for didn't even win the league last season. It's quite staggering, and how much Liga improves. And also, Jeremy Smith raised a great point to me, the fact that, look, everyone wants to sign players from Liga. It can't be that bad of a league if so many players from there are being coveted by so many clubs. So there is that to factor into. I think that's frankly a joke, and I think that Messi would be interesting in Liga, especially a more physical league than La Liga, and a much closer kind of comparison in regards to physicality to the Premier League. So how he gets on will certainly be interesting if he does go there. But my prediction is that I think now I lean more towards him going. But there's always the possibility in my mind that he will end up staying once again with Barcelona. There you go. Let's scroll up and see some questions that I may have missed from early on. King says, Tom, how hard is it to balance your full-time job with YouTube and private life? Thank you, King, for the personal question. I'm joking. I don't mind answering questions of that nature. It's not that hard. It's not that hard. I say not that hard. I am changing. I'm in the middle of changing jobs. So I don't know what the next phase of my life is going to be and how juggling this with private life and being in London for some of my job as well. I don't know how that's going to affect things. And I'm excited to see what happens. I'm excited for the change. I'm excited to where this is going to go. I think we're going to do some great things with Football.London and Reach with this new fan brand. See, I should clarify, this is very much a Reach project. It's not a Football.London project, although there is an association there from Reach being connected with or owning Football.London. So there is that, so to make that clear. But this is very much a Reach fan brands team that we're putting together, and I'm very excited about where we're going to go with it. I can't say too much about it, but I'm very excited about where it's going to go. I think there's some great people like Chris Davison that you obviously know. There's some other people joining the team that you may be aware of as well, and you obviously know people who work at Football.London as well very well too. So I'm excited about it. How that's going to affect TGT, we will wait and see. We will wait and see for how that affects things. I hope it doesn't affect I have no doubt I'm still doing the channel. The channel's not going anywhere, but there will be some significant changes about when certain shows are going to be, when they can be. And in regards to kind of how I balance it, at the end of the day, one of my favorite YouTubers is Casey Neistat, and watching kind of his stuff and the way that he talks about work. And the fact, if you're not working, you're not really progressing. And if you're not doing something, you're not really progressing. And I think there's important things that you should spend time with your family. But I often find myself getting quite bored with my free time. I used to really be into gaming. I'm less and less into it now. I don't really play FIFA. In fact, I deleted it and I re-downloaded it so I could play in the Gooners versus Cancer charity tournament, which is still going. Won my group stage games, all 6 of them. So hopefully things go well in the knockout rounds. Amazing. It's like riding a bike. You delete the game, you re-download it, you win 6 in a row. It's like riding a bike. But yeah, it's going to be interesting, King, to see how things change with the new job and with how things go. But we'll wait and see how things do go. Dark Aspect says, need 4K streams top. This camera is 4K. It's just because we do these shows live and because they're not really pre-recorded, annoyingly, and I don't know, it's probably because of the internet. I don't know what it is. We are getting kind of fiber installed in my area. So hopefully that will improve things a lot. But yeah, because it's a live show, unfortunately, it's annoying that it doesn't stream fully. And I am wired internet. I'm not on the Wi-Fi. We dug out the entire hole in the wall to make it wired internet, and it's still, not perfect. But yeah, well, hopefully we can get you guys some 4K, and maybe that's something that we will invest in with some 4K camera equipment. But yeah, we'll see where that goes. But I appreciate the feedback, so we'll wait and see. I'm now going to go and watch the rest of the Community Shields. If that's what it's still, Charity Shield, Community Shield, whatever it's called. We're going to go and watch that. Of course, we are the holders, so we are about to see it taken away from us. But certainly interesting to see what happens in that game, where that goes. I'm not going to say anything about the result because those watching live or those watching on catch up will know a lot more than me. Please do drop a like on the video, guys. And also, as we mentioned already, our sponsor for the shows over the next forthcoming week or so is Pick Your Team from the Arsenal Review. Make sure you do indeed go and check it out and predict your team. Out of the season, you could be in with winning £1,000. It's free to play, and all you need to do is try and guess Arteta's team every single week for every single game, and you could be in for some great prizes. And we're going to be using this, of course, with our preview shows throughout the season as well to try and predict what Mikel Arteta may end up doing for the season. Link is in the description for that, so make sure you have a go and check it out, sign up, and help support the channel if you would like to. And you can, of course, vote for us in the FCAs. I keep calling it the FBAs because it used to be called that, but it's the FCAs. So make sure you go vote for us. Information is scrolling across the bottom of your screen now, and you can find more if you do not have Twitter with the links in the description. Enjoy the rest of your weekend, people. I'll be back with you tomorrow morning for the 8 a.m. transfer update show. Have an absolutely fantastic evening, and there may be no Love Island tonight, but I'll be back tomorrow. So 9 a.m.s are back and saved after a Saturday. I know Vinny will appreciate that one. See you guys very, very soon, and as always, up the Arsenal.